I'm Lieutenant Colonel Linda Solomon, 38, and I built my career from nothing but grit, discipline, and a commitment to bringing my people home. For years, I showed up for my family the same way, quietly, consistently, without hesitation. But when my own sister-in-law accused me of being drunk at noon in front of the entire family, mocking the tremor caused by a bullet wound I earned in Kandahar, I reached a breaking point that changed everything. Have you ever been dismissed, humiliated, or underestimated by someone you poured yourself into? If you have, share your story in the comments. Trust me, you're not the only one. Before we get into what went down, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to draw a hard line after being wronged, hit like and subscribe for more real stories about boundaries, resilience, and reclaiming your worth. What happened next might surprise you. I've seen tremors in 100 different hands over the years: combat medics, pilots coming off 15-hour missions, young airmen after their first firefight. But I never thought I'd be explaining my own shaking hand to a room full of relatives who should have known better. That moment at the family dinner, when my sister-in-law gasped loud enough for everyone to hear, wasn't just about spilled wine. It was about everything that had been building between us for months, maybe years. Karen had married into our family when I was already a captain, already deep into my Air Force career, already carrying the kind of experience that doesn't fit neatly into Sunday brunch conversations. At first, she seemed genuinely curious about military life. She'd ask questions about deployments, about what officers actually do beyond the uniforms and ceremonies. I thought we'd be close. I'd babysit her kids when Daniel traveled for work, helped them move twice, even lent them money when their basement flooded after that bad spring storm. She said she'd pay me back. That conversation never happened again. The shift was gradual. Small comments that I told myself were just her being stressed, just her trying to find her place in a family that had its own rhythms and history. "You look tired all the time," she'd say, her voice carrying that particular tone that sounds like concern but lands like criticism. "Do they make you work weekends?" As if my schedule was some corporate policy I could negotiate. The drinking comments started about 6 months before the dinner incident. Nothing direct at first, just observations wrapped in jokes. "Military people drink more than they admit, right?" she'd said at a barbecue, laughing while watching me nurse a single beer over 3 hours. My brother Daniel would brush it off whenever I mentioned feeling uncomfortable. "She's just stressed," he'd say. "You know how she gets." I did know. I was starting to understand exactly how she got. The first real warning sign came at that same barbecue, mid-July, heat shimmering off the grill. I was holding a glass of lemonade, my right hand tremoring slightly, nothing dramatic, just the usual nerve damage flare-up that happens when I'm tired or the weather's changing. Karen walked past, physically moved my hand to steady it, and said loud enough for the people nearby to hear, "Geez, can't even hold a lemonade?" She laughed. Everyone laughed. But I caught something in her eyes, something sharper than humor. Something that looked almost satisfied. I went home that night and stood in front of my bathroom mirror, rolling up my sleeve to look at the scar. Circular, clean, about the size of a dime. The skin around it still felt different, tighter, less responsive. The nerve damage radiates down to my fingers on cold days or when I'm exhausted. It's been 5 years since Kandahar, and most days I don't think about it. Most days it's just part of the landscape of my body, like the small scar on my knee from childhood or the crooked pinky finger I broke playing volleyball at the academy. But standing there, looking at it after Karen's comment, I felt something shift. My service had always been something my family respected, even if they didn't fully understand it. My father kept my promotion coins in a small display case in the living room. My mother had framed photos from my commissioning ceremony. When I made captain at 31, Daniel took me out for dinner and told me he was proud. Karen was there that night too, newly married, smiling, asking questions about what the rank meant. I wondered when that pride had turned into something else for her. When had my uniform become evidence of distance rather than service? When had my deployment cycles become excuses rather than duty? She developed a new circle of friends over the past year, corporate wives, women who measured success in titles and salaries, and the right neighborhood addresses. I'd met them a few times at family gatherings. They were polite but cool, the kind of people who ask what you do and then subtly disengage when the answer doesn't fit their framework. Karen had started adopting their language, their priorities, their way of measuring worth. My friend Amanda's husband just made VP, she'd said when I got promoted to major. That's nice for you too, though. The though hung in the air like a judgment. I started attending fewer family events. Not dramatically, I was deployed half the time anyway, but I stopped making the extra effort to show up for every birthday party and cookout. When I was stateside, I'd visit my parents directly, see Daniel separately. Karen noticed. Of course she noticed. "You're never around anymore," she said once, her tone suggesting I was choosing to be absent rather than acknowledging that my job required it. "It's like you're avoiding us." She said us, but meant me. I could feel it. The tension built in small increments, like pressure behind a dam. Each comment, each subtle dig, each time she made my service sound like a character flaw instead of a commitment, it all accumulated. I told myself I was being oversensitive, that she didn't mean it the way it sounded, that family was complicated and I should be more patient. I told myself a lot of things that turned out not to be true. The holiday lunch was supposed to be simple. My parents hosted, the table set with the good china Mom only used a few times a year. Ellen and Robert Solomon, retired school teacher and postal worker, proud of their kids and grateful for family time. Daniel and Karen arrived with their 2 children. I came alone, as always, fresh off a training cycle that had kept me at base for 3 straight weeks. It was noon. The light came through the dining room windows at that particular winter angle, bright, clear, unforgiving. Everyone was seated, passing dishes, making small talk about the kids' school play and my father's golf game and whether the turkey was too dry. Normal. Comfortable. Then I reached for the wine bottle. My hand trembled. Not violently, just enough that the bottle tilted wrong and a splash of red wine hit the white tablecloth. In the moment before Karen spoke, I saw the stains spreading and thought about how easily things unravel, how one small malfunction can expose everything underneath. Karen gasped. The sound was too loud, too theatrical, designed to draw attention. "Look at her shaking," she said, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that carried perfectly across the table. Drunk at noon. The room went still. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. My mother's hand froze halfway to her water glass. Daniel's fork clinked against his plate. Karen moved quickly, dabbing at the wine stain with her napkin, making a show of the cleanup. "This is becoming a pattern," she muttered, but everyone heard it. Everyone was supposed to hear it. A few relatives glanced at me with expressions I couldn't quite read, confusion, maybe embarrassment, maybe concern. No one said anything. The silence pressed against my chest like a weight. I took a careful breath, keeping my voice level, making sure every word was clear and calm. "I'm not drunk, Karen." She looked up from the tablecloth, her eyes meeting mine with something that almost looked like triumph. "Then what is it?" She stepped closer, positioning herself where everyone could see. "Because this is embarrassing." I could have explained quietly. I could have made it private. But something about her tone, about the performance of it, about the months of accumulated disrespect, something made me choose visibility instead. I rolled up my right sleeve. The motion was deliberate, unhurried. The fabric bunched at my elbow. The scar set there on my upper arm, undeniable. The room's silence changed quality, became heavier. My father put his fork down carefully. Daniel froze completely, his face cycling through confusion and recognition and horror. Karen's expression flickered, not to compassion, but to something closer to discomfort at being caught in a miscalculation. "It's nerve damage," I said. My voice stayed steady. "From a gunshot wound." Karen blinked, thrown off her script. "From what?" I could have stopped there. I could have left it vague. Instead, I gave her the truth, simple and complete. Kandahar. I was pulling a wounded airman out of a collapsed compound during an insurgent attack. A sniper round caught me on the way out. The silence turned absolute. No one moved. No one looked away. The bullet went through the brachial plexus. I continued, my tone neutral, almost clinical. Nerve damage is permanent. My hand trembles sometimes, especially when I'm tired or cold or when the pressure changes. It has nothing to do with alcohol. It has everything to do with saving Technical Sergeant Luis Marquez's life while taking enemy fire. I could see Karen's mind working, trying to find a way to reframe this, to recover the high ground. She opened her mouth, closed it, finally managed. I didn't know. You never asked, I said quietly. That was the moment it became clear to everyone in the room. This wasn't ignorance. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was contempt dressed up as concern, judgment masquerading as worry. Karen had decided who I was without ever bothering to learn the truth. My mother's face had gone pale. She was looking at the scar like she'd never seen it before, even though I knew she had. She'd been there in the hospital during my recovery, had helped me through physical therapy. But seeing it displayed like this, in the context of her daughter-in-law's accusation, it was different. The betrayal landed differently for her than it did for me. For me, it was almost clarifying. The relationship had been damaged for a while. This just made the damage visible. But for my mother, watching someone she'd welcomed into our family treat her daughter with such casual cruelty, that was its own wound. Daniel finally found his voice. Karen, what the hell? She turned to him, her expression shifting to defensive. How was I supposed to know? She never talks about it. Maybe because people don't usually have to justify their injuries to family, I said. I wasn't angry. That was the strange part. I'd expected to feel rage or hurt, but instead I felt something closer to relief. The pretense was over. The careful navigation, the swallowed responses, the benefit of the doubt I'd been extending for months, all of it could stop now. Karen tried once more, her voice smaller. I just thought, you thought what you wanted to think, I said. You decided I was a mess, and you looked for evidence to confirm it. You never considered that there might be another explanation. You never asked. My brother looked between us, clearly wanting to smooth things over but not knowing how. This wasn't something he could fix with an apology or a joke or by asking everyone to just move on. The meal dissolved after that. People made excuses about needing to get home, about traffic, about early starts the next morning. My parents tried to salvage something, but the damage was done. Not to the dinner, to the foundation of trust that's supposed to hold a family together. As people filtered out, a few approached me quietly. My father's brother, Uncle Tim, put a hand on my shoulder and asked if I was okay. My cousin Jennifer, who'd been sitting at the far end of the table, stopped to thank me for my service, her voice tight with anger at what she'd witnessed. Karen left without speaking to me, gathering her children quickly and heading to the car. Daniel stayed behind, caught between his wife and his sister, between the life he'd built and the family he came from. After everyone else had gone, he pulled me into the kitchen. I'm sorry, he said. She didn't mean it. I looked at my brother, my older brother, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me study for the academy entrance exam and stood beside me at our father's retirement party. I loved him. But I wasn't going to let that love excuse what had happened. Yes, she did, I said quietly. She meant every word. She just didn't expect consequences. He flinched. She's under a lot of stress. Work has been crazy, the kids are struggling in school, and Daniel. I waited until he met my eyes. Stress doesn't make you cruel. It reveals what's already there. She's been building toward this for months. The comments about my schedule, about drinking, about me not being around, this was just the moment it came to a head. So, what do you want me to do? He sounded helpless. I want you to stop making excuses for her, I said. I want you to see what just happened for what it was. She publicly accused me of being drunk at a family dinner. She tried to humiliate me in front of our parents and relatives. And when I showed her the bullet wound I got serving our country, she couldn't even manage a real apology. He was quiet for a long moment. She's my wife. I know. And I'm your sister. I'm not asking you to choose. But I am telling you that I won't put myself in a position to be treated like that again. We stood there in our parents' kitchen, the same kitchen where we'd eaten breakfast before school 1,000 times, where we'd gathered after graduations and funerals and everything in between. The geography of childhood, now hosting an adult confrontation neither of us wanted but both of us needed. I'll talk to her, Daniel finally said. I nodded, but I didn't have much hope that talking would change anything. The problem wasn't communication. The problem was respect, and you can't talk someone into respecting you. They either do or they don't. That night, back in my apartment near base, I lay awake thinking about Kandahar. The memory was usually fragmented, just flashes, the heat, the dust, the sound of the compound wall collapsing, Luis Marquez's weight against me as I dragged him toward cover. But tonight it came back complete. We'd been on a joint operation, providing medical support for a compound clearance. The structure wasn't supposed to be occupied, but intelligence is only as good as its sources, and sometimes sources are wrong. The insurgents had been waiting. When the walls came down under mortar fire, Marquez was trapped in the rubble, his leg crushed. I was the closest medical officer. Going back in wasn't brave, it was procedure. Someone was hurt, and I had the training to help. Simple calculus. I remembered pulling him free, the weight of him, the dust choking us both. I remembered thinking about angles and cover and the fastest route back to the medical truck. I remembered the sound, sharp, clean, distinct, when the bullet hit. For a second I thought I'd been missed, that the impact was something else. Then my arm went hot and strange, like all the nerves were firing at once. I didn't stop moving. Couldn't. Marquez needed evacuation, and stopping would have meant both of us dying in that courtyard. I got him to the truck. Someone else took over his care. I sat down, and that's when I noticed the blood. The recovery took 8 months, surgery to remove the bullet fragments, physical therapy to regain range of motion, occupational therapy to adapt to the nerve damage. They told me early that the tremor might be permanent. They were right. Colonel Avery Butcher, my wing commander, visited me during recovery. She sat beside my hospital bed and told me I'd done everything right, that Marquez was going to walk again because I'd gotten him out in time. She also told me the injury would probably affect my career trajectory, that combat roles would be limited, that I'd need to focus on leadership positions that didn't require the same physical standards. I hadn't thought about that conversation in years. Butcher had been honest with me in a way that felt respectful rather than limiting. She'd acknowledged the cost without diminishing the value of what I'd done. Karen had done the opposite. She'd seen the cost and turned it into evidence of failure. Lying there in the dark, I realized something I'd been avoiding. I'd been waiting for Karen to see me the way I wanted to be seen. As capable, dedicated, valuable. I'd been trying to earn her respect through patience and accommodation and swallowing my responses to her comments. But you can't earn something that was never going to be offered. Some people look at a scar and see survival. Others look at the same scar and see weakness. Karen had made her choice clear. The question was what I was going to do about it. I thought about the younger officers I'd mentored, the advice I'd given them about dealing with difficult commands and toxic leaders. I'd always told them the same thing: set boundaries, document everything, and don't participate in your own disrespect. It was time to take my own advice. I got up, made coffee even though it was past midnight, and sat at my kitchen table. I thought about what I wanted, not what I thought I should want, not what would keep peace in the family, but what I actually needed to feel respected and safe in my own family relationships. The answer was simpler than I expected. I wanted acknowledgement of what she'd done, and I wanted assurance it wouldn't happen again. If I couldn't get those things, I wanted distance. I drafted a text to Daniel, then deleted it. This conversation needed to happen voice to voice, with time for him to process and respond without the pressure of immediate family presence. I'd call him in a few days, after everyone had time to sit with what happened. For now, I needed to focus on the part one could control: my own response, my own boundaries, my own willingness to accept or refuse certain behaviors. The tremor in my hand had exposed Karen's cruelty. Now I had to decide what to do with that information. I called Daniel 4 days later, on a Wednesday afternoon when I knew Karen would be at work and the kids at school. He answered on the second ring, his voice wary. We texted briefly in the days since the dinner, surface-level exchanges that danced around the real conversation we needed to have. I wanted to talk about what happened, I said, keeping my tone neutral, professional almost. Without an audience. He sighed. Yeah, I figured. I heard him moving, probably finding a private space. A door closed in the background. Karen feels terrible, he started. I cut him off gently but firmly. Daniel, I need to tell you what I'm willing to accept going forward, and I need you to hear it without defending her or explaining her feelings. Can you do that? Silence. Then, okay. I won't attend family gatherings where Karen is present unless she acknowledges what she did and what it implied. Not a vague apology, not an "I'm sorry you were offended" statement. A real recognition that she publicly accused me of being drunk and tried to humiliate me in front of our family. She didn't mean Daniel. He stopped. You're asking me to choose between my wife and my sister. No. I'm setting a boundary about my own presence and safety. You don't have to choose anything. But I'm not going to put myself in a position to be treated with contempt in the name of family harmony. Not anymore. I heard him breathing on the other end, processing. She's under a lot of stress. The pressure at her job, the kids, trying to keep up with her friends. I understand stress. I've commanded personnel under combat conditions. Stress doesn't make you cruel to people who've done nothing to you except exist in a way you don't understand. That's not stress. That's character. The words landed hard. I could feel him recoiling from them, wanting to argue, wanting to protect the woman he loved from this assessment. But he didn't argue. That silence told me he'd been thinking the same things, maybe for longer than I knew. What do you want me to do? He finally asked. Talk to her. Tell her what I've said. And understand that this is non-negotiable for me. I love you. You're my brother. But I won't compromise my dignity to make things easier for everyone else. She's going to be upset. She should be upset. She should be upset at herself for what she did, not at me for responding to it. We talked for another 20 minutes, circling the same territory in different ways. Daniel wasn't ready to fully confront what had happened. That would take time, maybe months, but I could hear him starting to see it. The pattern of behavior he'd been excusing or minimizing because it was easier than addressing it. After we hung up, I felt steadier. Not happy, not vindicated, just clearer about where I stood and what I was willing to tolerate. The next day, Karen texted me. The message was short, careful, calibrated to sound apologetic without actually apologizing. Sorry if I offended you. Didn't know about your situation. Hope we can move past this. I read it 3 times, looking for anything genuine, any acknowledgement of harm caused rather than offense accidentally given. There was nothing. Sorry if I offended you meant, I'm sorry you took it that way. Didn't know about your situation meant, it's not my fault I didn't know, as if the injury were some secret I'd been keeping rather than a visible scar I'd never hidden. Hope we can move past this meant, I want you to drop it so I don't have to feel uncomfortable. I didn't reply. Silence felt more honest than engaging with a non-apology designed to create the appearance of resolution without doing the actual work. Over the next week, I heard through Daniel that Karen was upset I hadn't responded. She complained to mutual friends, framed the situation as a misunderstanding blown out of proportion, positioned herself as the victim of my oversensitivity. I expected it. People who can't apologize genuinely often turn to narrative control instead. What I didn't expect was how quickly the family dynamics started shifting. My mother called, her voice tight with something I couldn't quite identify. Karen said you won't talk to her. That's not quite accurate, I said. She sent a text that didn't address what happened. I chose not to engage with a non-apology. She's trying, Linda. Is she? Because from where I'm sitting, she's trying to make this go away without actually acknowledging what she did. My mother was quiet. Then, I keep thinking about that dinner. What she said. How she looked at you. Yeah, I should have said something. In the moment. I should have, Mom, this isn't your fault. You were shocked. Everyone was. I was shocked, she agreed. But I've also been watching her treat you differently for months now. The comments, the little digs. I told myself I was imagining it, that you two just had different personalities. But I wasn't imagining it, was I? No. She let out a long breath. Your father and I talked about it. We're not having her here for a while. Not until she makes this right with you. I hadn't asked them to take sides, hadn't wanted them to. But hearing my mother choose to see the situation clearly, to prioritize my well-being over keeping peace, it meant more than I expected. Thank you, I said quietly. Daniel called again the following week. He sounded exhausted. She's not handling this well. She thinks everyone's turning against her. People are responding to her behavior, not conspiring against her. I know. I told her that. She doesn't want to hear it. He paused. She keeps saying you're overreacting. That it was one mistake, that she apologized. Daniel, what did she actually apologize for? Silence. I don't know. The text, I guess. Read it to me. Tell me what part of that text acknowledges what she did. I heard papers shuffling, his phone screen lighting up. He read it aloud, and I heard him realize mid-sentence what I'd already seen. It was a performance of apology, not the thing itself. She really hurt you, he said finally. It wasn't a question. Yeah, but more than that, she showed me how she sees me. How she's probably always seen me. My service isn't something she respects, it's something that makes her uncomfortable because it doesn't fit into her framework of success. And instead of examining that discomfort, she turned it into judgment of me. I think you're right, he said quietly. About which part? All of it. That conversation marked a shift. Daniel stopped defending Karen's actions and started acknowledging them. It didn't fix anything immediately, but it changed the foundation we were standing on. Meanwhile, my professional life continued its own trajectory, indifferent to family drama. My promotion to lieutenant colonel came through. The board results were posted on a Friday morning, and by that afternoon I had congratulations emails from commanders across 3 time zones. Colonel Butcher called personally. Knew it would happen, she said. You've earned this 10 times over, Solomon. Thank you, ma'am. How's the arm? She always asked. Same. Manageable. Good. Keep managing it. And keep leading. We need officers like you. The promotion felt like validation from the people whose opinions actually mattered, fellow service members, commanders who understood the work and sacrifice, airmen who I'd led and trained and trusted with difficult missions. Their respect had never wavered. They saw my injury for what it was, evidence of service, not evidence of failure. The contrast between that professional recognition and Karen's contempt became starker. In the Air Force, I was Lieutenant Colonel Solomon, officer with 18 years of service, combat veteran, leader of personnel. In Karen's framework, I was just a woman with a shaking hand who showed up to family events in a uniform that made her uncomfortable. I realized I'd been trying to make her see me the way my colleagues did. But that was never going to happen, because we were measuring worth on completely different scales. 3 months passed. I attended family gatherings at my parents' house, small dinners, holiday celebrations, without Karen present. Daniel came alone sometimes, brought the kids other times. We didn't talk about the absence, just worked around it. Karen's attempts at contact became less frequent. A message here, a social media like there, small gestures that seemed designed to maintain connection without actually addressing the rift. I ignored them all. Not out of spite, but because engagement without resolution felt dishonest. I wasn't angry anymore. That was the surprising part. Somewhere in those months, the anger had burned off, leaving something clearer and calmer. I didn't need her to understand what she'd done. I didn't need her to validate my service or acknowledge my sacrifice. I only needed to stop accepting her judgment as meaningful. The tremor in my hand still flared up. Cold mornings, long duty days, any time my body was tired or stressed. I stopped hiding it, stopped positioning my hands strategically or making excuses when it happened. At a staff meeting, my hand shook while I was pointing at a tactical display. A young lieutenant noticed and hesitated, clearly unsure whether to acknowledge it. Nerve damage, I said casually. Kandahar. Doesn't affect my judgment, just my motor control sometimes. She nodded, and we moved on. That simple acknowledgement, treating it as a fact rather than a flaw, felt revolutionary. I'd spent years minimizing the injury, trying not to let it define me or limit me. But pretending it didn't exist was just another form of shame. The injury existed. It was part of my story. And it didn't diminish me. My work expanded. The O5 position came with broader responsibilities, oversight of training programs, coordination across units, strategic planning that would affect operations years down the line. I mentored younger officers, particularly women navigating the particular challenges of military service in a structure still adjusting to full integration. One of them, a captain named Reeves, came to me about dealing with dismissive comments from a male colleague. She was frustrated, angry, trying to decide whether to file a formal complaint or just deal with it. "What do you want to happen?" I asked. She blinked. "I want him to stop." "Then that's what you advocate for. Not punishment necessarily, but behavioral change. Clear, documented, with command authority backing you up." "What if they say I'm overreacting?" "Are you?" "No." "Then their opinion of your reaction is their problem, not yours. Your job is to set the boundary and enforce it." She left my office looking steadier. A month later, I heard the situation had been resolved, a formal counseling session, command making it clear the behavior was unacceptable, and a noticeable change in the workplace dynamic. I thought about how similar that was to my situation with Karen, except there was no command structure to enforce accountability in family relationships. You just had to do it yourself, knowing that enforcement might mean distance. That realization brought a kind of peace. I couldn't control Karen's behavior. I couldn't make my brother see the situation before he was ready. I couldn't force my family into choosing sides or issuing ultimatums. But I could control my own boundaries, my own presence, my own willingness to accept certain treatments. And I could do it without anger, without bitterness, just with clear-eyed understanding of what I deserved. One evening, my father called. "Your mother and I are proud of you. Not just the promotion, though that too, but how you've handled this whole situation. I haven't done anything special. You've held your ground without burning bridges. You've been clear without being cruel. That's harder than people think." "It doesn't feel hard. It just feels necessary." "That's because you've been doing it so long in your professional life, it's become natural. But watching you apply it to family, that's been something to see." We talked for a while longer, about nothing particularly important, just the comfortable conversation of people who've known each other forever. After we hung up, I sat on my back deck watching the sun set over the base housing complex. Planes took off in the distance, their engines a familiar rumble. Somewhere out there, young airmen were standing watch, running operations, serving in ways most civilians would never see or understand. Karen thought my service made me less. The military had taught me it made me more. 6 months after the dinner incident, Karen sent a long message. Not a text this time, an email, carefully composed, multiple paragraphs. I read it twice before deciding how to respond. "Linda," it began. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened at the family dinner, and I realize I owe you a real apology. Not the brief text I sent before, which I can see now wasn't sufficient. When I made that comment about you being drunk, I was projecting my own insecurities onto you. I've been feeling overwhelmed and inadequate in a lot of areas of my life, and instead of dealing with that, I focused on perceived flaws in others. You became an easy target because your life is so different from mine, and I didn't take the time to understand what you've actually experienced or sacrificed. I should have asked about your injury. I should have considered that there might be explanations I didn't know. Instead, I jumped to conclusions that fit my narrative about you being distant or judging my choices. That was wrong, and I'm sorry. I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately or to pretend this didn't happen. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I did, and I'm working on being better. If you're ever willing to talk, I'd like to listen. If not, I understand." Karen, I read it a third time, looking for the same careful deflection I'd seen in the text. It wasn't there. This felt different, uncomfortable in the way genuine apologies often are, taking responsibility without hedging or qualifying. I sat with it for 2 days before responding. Daniel called during that time. "She told me she was going to write to you. A real apology." I got it. "And? It's better. But I'm not sure what I want to do with it yet." "That's fair." He sounded relieved that I was at least considering it. "She's been in therapy. Not because of this specifically, but it's come up. She's starting to recognize some patterns in how she treats people when she feels threatened. I'm glad she's getting help. But Daniel, that doesn't automatically reset our relationship." "I know. I just thought you should know she's trying." I appreciated that he was telling me without pressuring me, without asking me to make it easy for her. That was growth too, his ability to let uncomfortable situations stay uncomfortable until they were genuinely resolved. I replied to Karen's email 3 days later. Karen, thank you for the apology. I appreciate that you took the time to reflect and to explain what was happening for you. You're right that my life is different from yours, and that those differences created tension between us. I'm glad you're working on understanding your patterns. I'm not ready to resume regular contact or attend events together yet. The injury you witnessed is a permanent reminder of a very difficult period in my life, and having it used as evidence of weakness or failure was deeply hurtful. I need more time to trust that the dynamic between us has actually changed. If you're serious about listening and learning, I'm open to that eventually. But it needs to happen slowly on terms that feel safe for me. Linda, her response came quickly, just a few lines. I understand. Take whatever time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. No pressure, no timeline, no insistence that we were family and therefore required to move past this quickly. Just acceptance. I felt something shift, not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of the possibility of it. Meanwhile, my brother became more present. He visited me on base, brought the kids to see where I worked, asked real questions about my duties and responsibilities. His older daughter, Emma, 10 years old and full of curiosity, wanted to know everything. Did you really get shot? She asked, her eyes wide. I did. Right here. I showed her the scar, not to traumatize her but to normalize it. It hurt at the time, but I'm okay now. My hand shakes sometimes, but it doesn't stop me from doing my job. Were you scared? Yes. But I had training and I had a mission to help someone who was hurt. The training helped me do what I needed to do even though I was scared. She thought about that. I want to be brave like you. You are brave. Brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what's right even when you are scared. Daniel watched this exchange with an expression I couldn't quite read. Later, as they were leaving, he pulled me aside. Thank you for that. For talking to her honestly. She's a smart kid. She can handle honest answers. Karen would have told her not to ask about it. Would have treated your injury like something shameful or private. I know. I'm starting to see a lot of things I missed before, he said quietly. I'm sorry it took this long. You're seeing them now. That's what matters. A year after the dinner, I attended a family gathering where Karen was present. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation, just a quiet agreement that enough time had passed, enough work had been done, to try being in the same room again. My parents hosted a summer cookout. Karen arrived separately from Daniel and the kids, which I appreciated. She didn't make a show of approaching me, didn't try to hug or force familiarity. She just said hello, asked if I wanted anything from the kitchen, and gave me space. Throughout the afternoon, I watched her interact with others. The sharp edge I'd noticed before seemed softer. She listened more, dominated conversations less, seemed genuinely interested in my mother's stories about her gardening club and my father's golf complaints. When my hand tremored while I was carrying plates to the table, she didn't comment. Didn't stare, didn't look away dramatically, just treated it as normal. That small non-reaction felt like the most honest acknowledgement possible. Later, she approached me when I was alone on the deck. Can I say something? She asked. I nodded. I've been thinking about what I didn't understand before. About service, about what it costs. I started volunteering with a veteran support group. Just administrative stuff, filing, organizing events. But I've been hearing stories. That's good, I said. It's helped me see how much I didn't see. How narrow my definition of value was. I measured everything by corporate metrics and social status, and I made you small in my mind because you didn't fit that framework. I'm sorry. Not just for the dinner, but for all of it. All the comments and judgments that led up to that moment. I looked at her carefully, trying to assess sincerity. What I saw was uncomfortable self-awareness, the kind that comes from actually confronting your own failures rather than just performing contrition. I appreciate that, I said. And I appreciate the work you're doing. But Karen, I need you to understand, the relationship we had before is gone. If we're going to have any relationship going forward, it has to be built on who we both are now, not who we were trying to be then. I understand. Can we try? Maybe. With boundaries. With honesty. And with the understanding that if the old patterns resurface, I'm gone. No drama, no negotiations, just gone. She nodded. That's fair. We didn't hug. Didn't have a tearful moment of reconnection. Just reached an understanding about what might be possible if we both continued the work. Later that night, lying in bed, I thought about forgiveness and what it actually means. I'd spent months thinking I needed to feel warm toward Karen again, needed to genuinely like her and want her in my life. But maybe forgiveness didn't require any of that. Maybe it just required letting go of the anger, accepting that people are flawed and complicated, and choosing whether or not to engage based on current behavior rather than past hurt. I'd let go of the anger months ago. What remained was caution, clear boundaries, and a willingness to see if change was real or just performed. That felt honest. That felt sustainable. My career continued its trajectory. The promotion to O5 opened doors, opportunities for command positions, specialized training, strategic roles that would shape Air Force operations. I applied for a position overseeing training protocols for combat rescue operations, bringing my Kandahar experience full circle. Colonel Butcher called to tell me I'd been selected. "You're going to shape how we prepare officers for these situations for the next decade," she said. "Your experience matters. Your injury matters. Use it." "Yes, ma'am." "And Solomon? Don't hide the tremor. Let them see it. Let them know that service costs something, that injuries happen, and that you can still lead effectively. That's a lesson some of these young officers need." She was right. The next generation of combat rescue officers needed to see that wounds didn't disqualify you, that adaptation was possible, that the injury itself was evidence of having done the work rather than evidence of failure. I started including my injury in briefings about combat medical operations, not dramatically, just factually. Explaining the mechanism of nerve damage, the recovery process, the adaptations required. Showing them that I was still here, still leading, still effective. The response from young officers was powerful. Several approached me privately to share their own injuries or health conditions they'd been hiding, afraid it would limit their careers. I counseled them on disclosure, accommodation, and leading despite physical limitations. One lieutenant told me, "I thought I had to be perfect to be worthy of the uniform. Seeing you lead with an injury that's visible, it made me realize that's not what this is about." "It's not about perfection," I told her. "It's about competence, integrity, and commitment. The uniform doesn't make you invulnerable. It represents your willingness to serve despite vulnerability." That became a kind of mission for me, normalizing the reality that service costs something, that bodies break, that healing is ongoing, and that none of that diminishes the value of the service itself. Karen's public judgment had tried to weaponize my injury. But through refusing to accept that framing, through treating my tremor as a fact rather than a flaw, I'd found a way to make it meaningful for others struggling with similar challenges. 2 years after the dinner, my family held a birthday celebration for my father's 70th. The whole family was there: parents, brother, Karen, kids, cousins, aunts, and uncles. I arrived in civilian clothes, my uniform left at home for once. The tremor acted up during dinner, my hand shaking as I cut into birthday cake. I didn't hide it, didn't comment on it, just studied my hand and continued. Emma, Daniel's daughter, now 12 and thoughtful, said quietly, "Your hand is shaking. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just the nerve damage acting up. Happens sometimes." Karen, sitting across the table, met my eyes briefly. Something passed between us, not friendship exactly, but mutual understanding. She'd learned to see the injury for what it was. I'd learned that her judgment never had the power I'd given it. Later, my father stood to make a toast. He raised his glass and looked around the table at his assembled family. "I'm grateful for all of you," he said. "For the ways you've grown and changed and held each other accountable. For the way this family has learned to have hard conversations and come out stronger." His eyes found mine. "And I'm proud of my daughter, who serves her country with honor and teaches us all what real strength looks like." The table echoed the toast, Karen included. As people mingled after dinner, I found myself on the back porch with Daniel. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the kids play in the yard. "Thank you," he said finally. "For what?" "For setting boundaries. For not letting me pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. For being patient with me while I figured out what was actually happening in my own house. You did the work, Daniel. I just held the line. Still, you could have written me off. Written all of us off. But you stayed connected while maintaining your dignity. That's harder than people think. I learned it in the military. Clear expectations, firm boundaries, consistent consequences. It works for personnel management. Turns out it works for family too. He laughed. Everything's a command structure for you. Not everything. But relationships need structure. Otherwise, people just drift into patterns that hurt them. We watched the sun setting, the light golden and warm. My hand tremored slightly in the cooling air. I steadied it against the porch railing, not hiding, just supporting. Does it hurt? Daniel asked. Not usually. It's just annoying. Like a reminder that I'm tired or cold or stressed. I'm sorry I didn't understand before. When Karen made that comment at the dinner, I should have said something immediately. Should have defended you. You did eventually. That's what matters. It shouldn't have taken me so long. No, I agreed. But growth is never as fast as we want it to be. For any of us. We stood there a while longer, brother and sister, rebuilding trust one quiet conversation at a time. Inside, the party continued, laughter, dishes clattering, children's voices raised in play. Normal family noise no longer weighted with unspoken tension. That night, driving home, I thought about the journey from that humiliating dinner to this peaceful birthday celebration. The distance wasn't measured in forgiveness or reconciliation. It was measured in self-respect maintained, boundaries held, and the quiet dignity of refusing to let someone else's judgment define your worth. My hand shook slightly on the steering wheel. I smiled. The tremor wasn't a flaw. It was a map of where I'd been, what I'd survived, who I'd saved. It was evidence of service, of sacrifice, of a moment when I chose someone else's life over my own comfort. Karen had tried to make it evidence of weakness. But weakness isn't in the shaking hand. It's in the need to judge others to feel superior. Strength isn't in perfect control. It's in continuing to serve, to lead, to show up even when your body bears visible marks of the cost. I'd spent years hiding the tremor, minimizing it, trying not to let it define me. Now I understood. It didn't define me. It simply described one part of my story. And that story, combat rescue officer, wounded in service, still leading, still growing, still teaching the next generation, was something I no longer needed anyone else to validate. The respect of my colleagues, the trust of the airmen I led, the love of family members who'd learned to see clearly, that was enough. More than enough. And if someone tried to shame the scars I'd earned, well, that just revealed their own limitations, not mine. I pulled into my driveway, turned off the engine, and sat in the quiet darkness for a moment. My hand rested on my lap, still tremoring slightly from the long drive. I looked at it, this imperfect, damaged, resilient hand that had pulled a wounded airman from a collapsed building, that had held countless lives steady during medical emergencies, that had signed orders and reports and commendations. That shook sometimes and didn't stop being capable. I thought about what I'd tell a young officer struggling with visible injury, with the fear that physical damage would undermine their authority or worth. I'd tell them what I'd learned. Leadership isn't about appearing invulnerable. It's about being honest about cost while remaining committed to purpose. Real strength acknowledges limitation while refusing to be limited. And the people who matter, the ones whose respect is worth having, will see your scars as evidence of having done something that mattered, not evidence of being broken. I stepped out of the car, my hand steadying as I gathered my bag. The night was cool and clear, stars visible despite the base lights. Somewhere in the distance, another flight was taking off, young pilots beginning their training, starting their own journeys of service. I'd be there tomorrow, teaching them, leading them, showing them by example that serving means accepting risk, that risk sometimes means injury, and that injury never diminishes the value of the service itself. The story that began with public humiliation and a spilled glass of wine had become something else entirely, a testament to the power of holding your ground, the importance of choosing dignity over peace, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the judgment of small minds can never touch the truth of who you are. I walked inside, home from the party, steady in myself. My hand might shake. My history might be complicated. My family relationships might require careful navigation. But I was Lieutenant Colonel Linda Solomon, combat veteran, leader of airmen, survivor of wounds both visible and invisible. And that was more than enough. 30 years later, I stand in front of a mirror adjusting my uniform for the last time as an active duty officer. The face looking back at me is 68 years old, lined with decades of service, command, and the particular kind of weathering that comes from a life spent in purpose. My hair, now completely silver, is pulled back in the same tight bun I've worn since my academy days. The tremor in my right hand is more pronounced now, age and nerve damage compounding each other, but my fingers still work well enough to fasten the buttons, pin the insignia, straighten the collar. 2 stars sit on my shoulders. Rear Admiral lower half equivalency in joint service terms, though in the Air Force I retired as a brigadier general. The promotion came 8 years ago, near the end of my career, a capstone to decades of leadership that took me from medical operations to training command to strategic planning at the Pentagon. Today is my official retirement ceremony, and the tremor that once caused me shame has become simply part of who I am, visible evidence of a defining moment that shaped everything that followed. The ceremony is at 1400 hours. I have 2 hours to gather my thoughts, review my remarks, and prepare to say goodbye to the uniform that has been my identity for 46 years. My phone buzzes. A text from Daniel, "We're all here. Dad's doing okay, getting him settled in his seat now. Mom's crying already, and you haven't even started yet." I smile. Our father is 99 now, frail but sharp-minded, determined to attend despite the 3-hour drive from the assisted living facility. Our mother passed 4 years ago, peacefully in her sleep, after a long life of watching her children grow into people she was proud of. Daniel is 70 now, retired himself, his hair white and his movements slower, but his presence still solid and reliable. And Karen. Karen is 67, also retired from the corporate world that once defined her, now spending her time volunteering with veteran support organizations and serving on the board of a foundation that provides mental health services to combat survivors. The transformation that began with that apology email 28 years ago became genuine, sustained, real. We're not close, not in the way sisters-in-law sometimes are, but we have something more valuable. Mutual respect built on honest acknowledgement of past harm and consistent behavioral change. She'll be at the ceremony too. With Daniel, with their children. Emma is 40 now, a doctor, married with 2 kids of her own. Their son Marcus is 37, a teacher. The extended family has grown, complexified, weathered its own storms over the decades. But the foundation shift that happened around that dining room table 3 decades ago changed how we related to each other. We learned to name harm, to hold boundaries, to let relationships evolve rather than forcing them to stay static. I finish with my uniform and sit at the small desk in my office, a space I've occupied for the past 6 years as Deputy Director of Medical Operations Strategy. The walls are covered with photos spanning my career, my commissioning at 22, fresh-faced and idealistic, promotion ceremonies marking progression from second lieutenant through the ranks, deployment photos from Kandahar and 3 subsequent tours, group shots with wings I've commanded, units I've led, officers I've mentored. And there, in a small frame near the desk lamp, a photo from that birthday party 2 years after the dinner incident. My whole family gathered, genuine smiles, no performance. My hand shakes as I pick up the speech I've been working on for weeks. The tremor is worse today, probably from nerves and lack of sleep and the weight of transition. I've spent 46 years defined by this role, this uniform, this structure. Tomorrow I'll wake up as a civilian for the first time since I was 22. The prospect is terrifying and liberating in equal measure. There's a knock at my door. Colonel Sarah Mendez, my chief of staff, pokes her head in. "General, they're starting to gather. Press is set up. VIPs are arriving. You good?" "Good as I'll be." She steps inside, closing the door behind her. Sarah is 43, a combat veteran herself with 2 deployments to Syria and 1 to Afghanistan. She came up through the ranks I helped reshape. The protocols and training programs I developed after Kandahar became standard across combat rescue operations. She's told me more than once that seeing me lead with a visible injury changed her understanding of what was possible. I wanted to say something before all the official stuff starts, she says. You changed my career. Probably saved it, honestly. When I got injured in Syria, the shrapnel in my leg, the limp I still have, I thought I was done. Thought they'd medically retire me or push me into a desk job where I'd fade away. But you showed me that injury doesn't mean ineffective. That adaptation is strength, not weakness. Everything I've accomplished since then is because you normalized what I thought was disqualifying. My throat tightens. You did the work, Sarah. I just refuse to pretend the work wasn't hard. No, ma'am. You did more than that. You made space for people like me to exist in leadership without having to hide our scars. That's legacy. After she leaves, I sit with that word. Legacy. What am I leaving behind beyond the policies and protocols and updated training manuals? I think about the hundreds of officers I've mentored over the decades. The young lieutenant who came to me terrified about disclosing a traumatic brain injury. The captain struggling with PTSD who thought seeking treatment would end his career. The major with chronic pain from a parachute accident who believed leadership positions were closed to him. I'd counseled them all with the same message: your injury is part of your story, not the end of it. Lead from where you are, adapt what needs adapting, and never let anyone make you ashamed of scars earned in service. How many of them had gone on to command positions themselves? How many had created environments where their own subordinates felt safe being honest about physical and psychological wounds? I didn't know the exact numbers, but I felt the ripple effect every time a junior officer approached me at a conference or training event to say, "I heard about you from my commanding officer. They said if I was struggling, I should talk to you because you get it." I get it. Those 3 words became a kind of code over the years, an acknowledgement that lived experience mattered, that the gap between textbook leadership and actual human complexity required someone who'd navigated it themselves. The Kandahar injury had given me that. Karen's cruelty had forced me to stop hiding it. And the 3 decades that followed had allowed me to turn both the wound and the exposure into something that helped others. My phone buzzes again. This time it's Emma, Daniel's daughter. "Aunt Linda, I'm here with the kids. They're so excited to see you in uniform one last time. Jack keeps asking if you'll let him try on your hat." I smile and text back, "Tell Jack he can try it on after the ceremony. But he has to promise to take care of it." Jack is Emma's 7-year-old son, fascinated by military service in the way children sometimes are, seeing the uniforms and ceremonies without yet understanding the cost. Emma has been careful about how she talks to him about my career, balancing pride with honesty about what service requires. She asked me once how to explain my injury to him in an age-appropriate way. "Tell him the truth," I'd said. That I was helping someone who was hurt, and I got hurt too, but I'm okay now. Kids can handle honesty better than adults think. She'd done exactly that, and Jack had processed it the way children do, accepting it as fact and moving on. No drama, no pity, just understanding that sometimes helping people means you get hurt, and that's okay because the helping mattered more. I check the time. 90 minutes until the ceremony. I should head over to the venue, let them mic me up, go through the final logistics. But I sit a moment longer, looking at my hand. The tremor has been my constant companion for 33 years. Some days it's barely noticeable. Other days, like today, it's pronounced enough that simple tasks require extra focus. I've learned to work with it, keeping my elbows anchored when I need steadiness, using voice commands for devices when typing becomes frustrating, asking for help when I need it instead of struggling alone. The injury retired me from active combat medical roles, but it opened doors I might never have walked through otherwise. Training development, strategic planning, policy work that shaped how the Air Force approached combat rescue operations for an entire generation. The limitation became a redirection, and the redirection became a career I'm deeply proud of. I think about TSGT Luis Marquez, the airman I pulled from that collapsed compound. He recovered fully, returned to active duty, eventually retired as a master sergeant after 25 years of service. We've stayed in touch sporadically over the decades, holiday cards, occasional emails, a few visits when our paths crossed at military events. He has grandchildren now. A whole life that continued because I made the choice to go back into that compound despite the danger. The bullet that damaged my nerves saved his life. I've never regretted the trade. I stand, gather my speech and my cover, and take one last look around the office I'm about to vacate. Someone else will sit at this desk next week, will make their own mark on these walls, will shape the next era of medical operations strategy. The work continues whether I'm here or not. That's as it should be. The walk across space to the ceremony venue is familiar, paths I've traveled thousands of times over my career. Airmen salute as I pass, some of them younger than my service record, others senior, enlisted who've been in longer than some officers have been alive. I return each salute with the crispness that was drilled into me at the academy decades ago. Muscle memory, honor, respect for the uniform even as I'm about to take it off for the last time. The venue is an aircraft hangar, decorated with Air Force flags and bunting, rows of chairs arranged in precise military formation. Several hundred people are gathered, colleagues, subordinates, superiors who've come out of their own retirements to attend, family members spanning 3 generations. At the front, a small stage with a podium and the official Air Force SIL. Colonel Mendez meets me at the entrance. Media wants a quick interview before we start. Just 5 minutes. You up for it? Let's get it done. The reporter is young, maybe 30, professional but clearly doing her homework on the fly. She asks the standard questions about my career highlights, my proudest moments, what I'll miss most about service. I give practiced answers, the kind I've delivered at dozens of public events over the years. Then she shifts. I understand you sustained a combat injury during a rescue operation in Kandahar. How did that experience shape your approach to leadership? I pause, considering how much to share, how honest to be. My hand tremors slightly as I adjust my position, and I see her notice it. I don't hide it. The injury taught me that effectiveness and perfection aren't the same thing, I say. I learned to lead with visible limitations, which made it easier for the people I commanded to be honest about their own struggles. The military is getting better at acknowledging that service costs something, that bodies and minds bear the weight of what we ask people to do. My injury became part of that larger conversation, and I'm proud of the small role I played in normalizing those conversations. Do you have any regrets about the incident? None. I'd make the same choice again. The airman I pulled out that day went on to have a full career and a family. My hand shakes sometimes. That's not a regret, that's just the price of doing what mattered. The ceremony begins at exactly 1400 hours. The presiding officer, a 3-star general I've worked with for 15 years, delivers opening remarks about my career, my contributions, my impact on Air Force medical operations. The words are generous, maybe more generous than I deserve, but I accept them as the institution's way of honoring not just me but everyone who's served in similar capacities. Then it's my turn. I step to the podium, my speech in hand though I've mostly memorized it. The tremor makes the paper shake slightly, and I set it down on the podium surface rather than holding it. The room is quiet, hundreds of faces watching, waiting. 46 years ago, I raised my right hand and swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I was 22 years old. I thought I understood what that oath meant. I didn't. Understanding came slowly, through deployments and commands and moments of crisis, where the abstract became devastatingly concrete. I tell them about Kandahar, not the full story, just the outline. The collapsed compound, the wounded airmen, the decision to go back in, the bullet, the recovery. I keep it brief, factual, focused on what the experience taught me rather than dramatizing the moment itself. The injury changed my career trajectory, I continue. It closed some doors and opened others. It made me a better leader because it gave me first-hand experience with adaptation, with leading despite limitation, with the reality that perfect physical fitness isn't a prerequisite for effective command. Over the past 3 decades, I've worked to create space in our service for people whose bodies bear the marks of what we've asked them to do. I've tried to normalize conversations about injury, about recovery, about the ongoing work of serving while managing the consequences of having served. I look out at the audience and find familiar faces. Daniel, sitting with Karen and their children and grandchildren. My father in a wheelchair at the end of a row, alert and present despite his age. Colonel Mendez and dozens of other officers I've mentored. Young airmen I've never met but who came anyway, drawn by some connection to the work I've done or the example I've tried to set. I'm often asked what I'm most proud of, I say. The answer isn't a single mission or promotion or policy change. It's the hundreds of conversations I've had with service members who were struggling with injury, with mental health, with the gap between who they thought they had to be and who they actually were. Being able to say, I understand, and have them believe it because they could see the evidence in my tremoring hand, that's what I'm proud of. Making space for honesty, for adaptation, for the reality that serving costs something and that cost doesn't diminish your value. I pause, my hand shaking as I turn the page of my speech. I don't try to hide it. I never have, not since that family dinner 30 years ago. In a few minutes, I'll remove this uniform for the last time as an active duty officer. Tomorrow, I become a veteran, joining the ranks of millions who've served and moved on to other chapters. But the work doesn't end. The conversations about injury and leadership, about visible wounds and invisible struggles, about creating military culture that honors both strength and vulnerability, that work continues. I hope I've contributed something meaningful to it. I know the next generation will take it further than I could imagine. I close with thanks to commanders who took chances on me, to subordinates who trusted me with their struggles, to family who supported me through deployments and injuries and the particular loneliness of military life. I mention my mother, gone 4 years now, whose pride in my service never wavered even when she didn't fully understand what it required. And then I step back from the podium. The presiding general comes forward. Together we perform the ritual of retirement, the folding of my guidon, the presentation of medals and certificates, the symbolic passing of responsibility to those who remain. My eyes stay dry through most of it, but when they present me with a flag folded by airmen I've commanded, I feel tears threatening. The ceremony concludes with final remarks from the general, then the benediction, then the traditional receiving line where attendees file past to offer congratulations and thanks. It takes nearly an hour. My hand aches from shaking so many hands, the tremor worsening with fatigue, but I greet each person with genuine gratitude. Emma approaches with her children. Jack, the 7-year-old, looks up at me with wide eyes. Can I try on your hat now? I remove my cover and place it on his head. It's far too large, sliding down over his eyes. He giggles, and Emma snaps a photo. Something about that image, my hat on a child's head, the next generation playing at service, without yet understanding its weight, hits me harder than expected. Take care of it, Jack, I tell him. That hat has been a lot of places. I will, Aunt Linda. I promise. Daniel and Karen approach together. My brother looks older than I expect. When did we both become elderly people? He pulls me into a long hug. Proud of you, little sister. Always have been. Karen waits her turn, and when Daniel releases me, she steps forward. The woman standing before me is so different from the one who gasped at my tremoring hand 3 decades ago that it's almost jarring. Age has softened her features, but more than that, genuine change has softened her spirit. Thank you for letting me be here, she says quietly. For letting me be part of your life after everything. I know I didn't deserve that grace. You earned it back, I tell her. Through consistency and genuine change. That matters. I tell people about you, she says. When I'm doing veteran advocacy work, when I'm talking to families about supporting service members, I tell them about my sister-in-law who I misjudged terribly and who taught me to see service differently. I hope that's okay. It's okay. And I mean it. My father is wheeled over by a care assistant. At 99, he's mostly deaf and his vision is failing, but when he sees me, his face lights up with unmistakable pride. I kneel beside his wheelchair, bringing myself to his eye level despite my own aging knees protesting. You did good, Linda, he says, his voice thin but clear. Your mother would be so proud. I'm so proud. I know, Dad. I've always known. He reaches for my hand, the one that tremors, and holds it steady in both of his. His hands shake too, age and Parkinson's making them unreliable. 2 generations of tremoring hands, holding each other, steady in their mutual unsteadiness. The shaking doesn't matter, he says. Never did. It's what you did with the rest of yourself that counted. I nod, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The reception continues for hours. Food, conversation, laughter, the particular bittersweet quality of endings that are also beginnings. I talk with colleagues about their work, with young officers about their careers, with family about what comes next. What has come next? I have consulting work lined up, helping civilian organizations understand military culture, advising on veteran integration programs, serving on boards that focus on combat injury recovery and support. I'll write, maybe, if I can find the discipline. I'll travel, certainly. I'll spend time with family, tend relationships I've neglected during decades of prioritizing service. But mostly, I'll continue the same work in a different context, advocating for honest conversations about what service costs, about visible and invisible wounds, about the gap between military mythology and military reality. The uniform changes, but the mission doesn't. As the reception winds down and people begin filtering out, I find myself standing alone near the hangar entrance, watching the late afternoon sun slant across the tarmac. Aircraft in the distance, the familiar rumble of engines, the organized chaos of a functioning airbase. This has been my world for 46 years. Tomorrow it becomes someone else's world, and I become a visitor. My hand tremors as I raise it one last time in salute to the flag flying over the base headquarters. The motion is instinctive, muscle memory from decades of repetition. The tremor doesn't diminish the salute. It never has. I think about that family dinner 30 years ago, the spilled wine, Karen's accusation, the moment I rolled up my sleeve and showed everyone the bullet wound that explained everything. That moment of public humiliation became a turning point, forcing me to stop hiding injury as if it were shameful and start treating it as what it actually was, evidence of service, of sacrifice, of choosing someone else's survival over my own comfort. If Karen hadn't made that accusation, would I have spent another decade minimizing my injury, making excuses for the tremor, trying to appear perfect instead of honestly capable? Maybe. Probably. Her cruelty became an unexpected catalyst, forcing a confrontation with truth I might have avoided otherwise. I don't thank her for it. Trauma isn't a gift, and cruelty doesn't become kindness just because you survive it. But I've learned to see even painful moments as part of a larger story, one that includes growth and change, and the slow work of becoming someone you're proud to be. Tomorrow I'll wake up as retired Brigadier General Linda Solomon. The rank stays with me, protocol and courtesy for those who've served at this level. But the authority is gone, the active command structure, the weight of current responsibility. It's both loss and liberation. I turn away from the tarmac and head toward my car. My hand shakes as I unlock the door. I pause, looking at it, this hand that served me for 68 years, that pulled a wounded airman from rubble, that signed orders affecting thousands of lives, that refused to be hidden even when hiding would have been easier. Thank you, I tell it quietly, acknowledging what it's done and what it's cost. Then I get in the car and drive away from the base, away from the ceremony, toward whatever comes next. The tremor continues, steady and familiar, a reminder that I'm still here, still leading in whatever capacity I can, still teaching by example that wounds don't disqualify you from effectiveness. They just require you to lead differently, more honestly. With the kind of authenticity that only comes from having survived something real. 30 years ago, I stood at a family dinner and showed them a scar. Today I stood at a retirement ceremony and showed them a career built on refusing to be ashamed of that scar. Both moments mattered. Both shaped everything that followed. And tomorrow I'll wake up and figure out what it means to serve without the uniform, to lead without the rank, to continue the work using whatever tools a veteran carries into civilian life. The hand will still shake. The scar will still be visible. The story will continue. That's enough. That's always been enough. And that's how a single comment at a family dinner revealed everything I'd been overlooking for years. Standing up for myself didn't just change the dynamic, it changed me. Now I want to hear from you. Has someone ever belittled you for something they didn't understand? Have you had to defend your accomplishments or your scars to people who should have protected you? What finally made you draw the line? Drop your story in the comments. If this resonated with you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs the reminder. Your worth isn't up for debate.